Sergeant Zach Thanor stepped out of his drop pod onto the purple soil of the alien world, squinting in the harsh glare of the binary suns. The rest of his squad emerged behind him, weapons at the ready. "Atmo is breathable," Zach said, checking his wrist scanner. "No signs of immediate threats. Looks like we're clear for now." Private Jenkins kicked at a cluster of shimmering blue mushrooms. "What kind of backwater shithole did the brass send us to this time?" "Can it, Jenkins?" Zach snapped. "We've got a job to do. Command said one of our deep space probes picked up some weird energy readings coming from those ruins over that ridge. Our orders are to investigate and report back." "Ruins? You mean that crumbling pile of rocks?" Private Hernandez asked, gesturing with her pulse rifle. "That's affirmative. Intel suggests it may be an ancient alien temple of some kind. Possibly of the Soxgar, that race of belligerent humanoids we tangled with in the Antares sector last year." "Ugh, I hate those guys," Jenkins muttered. "I still have nightmares about their brutal tactics and bloodthirsty ways." Zach ignored him and waved the squad forward. "Cut the chatter and keep alert. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Could be booby traps, automated defenses, or who knows what crazy alien shit. Stay frosty." They advanced cautiously, keeping to cover where the quotient only could. The landscape was barren and foreboding, strewn with jagged boulders and stunted, twisted vegetation. A hot, arid wind moaned across the flats, carrying an acrid stench. As they drew closer to the ruins, Zach could make out more details through his helmet visor's magnification. The structure appeared to be a squat, asymmetrical pyramid constructed of cyclopean blocks of pitted black stone. Strange symbols and worn carvings covered its surface. Several of the blocks near the peak had crumbled away, revealing dark openings into the interior. "Well, doesn't this place just look cheery as fuck?" Jenkins said. "Hernandez, you getting any energy readings?" The corporal studied her handheld auspex. "Affirmative, registering strong emanations coming from inside the structure. Nothing like I've seen before. These readings are off the charts." "Enough gawking," Zach said. "We're going in. Jenkins, Hernandez, cover our 5. Chang, Kowalski, with me. Activate helmet cams and stay sharp." They stacked up by a gaping triangular portal and switched on their rifle-mounted floodlights before proceeding inside. The beams cut through a hazy miasma of dust and pierced in oppressive gloom. The air was still and stifling. The passageway led to a grand vaulted chamber deep in the heart of the temple. Incongruous banks of sleek, high-tech-looking machinery and control panels lined the walls, humming and blinking. But Zach's attention was immediately drawn to the room's central feature. "Well, hello there, handsome," Jenkins quipped. In the center of the chamber stood a towering statue carved of glossy black stone, easily 3 meters tall. It depicted a powerful humanoid male, his chiseled features stern and noble. Thick cables ran from ports on the statue to the alien machinery. "What do you think it is?" Hernandez asked. "Some kind of alien god?" "Maybe," Zach said. "Kowalski, Chang, get scans and samples of everything." "I want—" A thunderous boom shook the temple, sending them staggering. Dust sifted down from the ancient stone ceiling. Alarms blared from the alien equipment. Zach swore. "Back to the entrance, double time. We're extracting now." They sprinted for the exit, but a hulking armored form blocked their path. It was humanoid, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with massively broad shoulders and rippling muscles visible beneath its form-fitting black bodysuit. A fearsome helmet concealed its features. It carried a vicious-looking double-headed battle axe in its powerful hands. "Soxgar!" Zach yelled. "Stand back, I've got this!" The alien warrior bellowed a challenge and charged, swinging its axe in a whistling arc. Zach ducked under the blow and rammed his shoulder into the Soxgar's midsection, driving it back. They traded blows in a furious melee, Zach's pulse rifle forgotten as he grappled with the alien hand-to-hand. The Soxgar was immensely strong, but Zach was faster, his human agility allowing him to evade the worst of the alien's attacks. He managed to get behind the Soxgar and lock his arm around his throat in a chokehold. The alien thrashed and bucked, but Zach held on grimly, squeezing with all his strength. With a final convulsive shudder, the Soxgar went limp. Zach released it, and the massive body toppled to the floor with a crash. Panting, Zach turned to his squad. They were staring at him in awe. "Holy shit, Sarge," Jenkins said. "That was some straight-up action hero shit right there." Zach waved off the praise. wincing as his bruised body protested. "Just doing my job. Now let's get the hell out of—" A chime sounded from the alien machinery, making them all flinch. Zach turned to see a holographic screen flicker to life above the control panels. The image showed a vast Sockscar city, its sleek towers gleaming under an alien sun. Hundreds of warriors marched and drilled in perfect unison, assembling for war. "Shit," Zach breathed. The Sockscar were preparing to unleash their armies on an unsuspecting galaxy once again. He had to warn Earth, the Alliance. Another chime and a new image appeared. A lush garden courtyard filled with dozens of beautiful humanoid females. They were clad in diaphanous gowns that left little to the imagination, their lithe bodies swaying sinuously to some unheard music. Their eyes smoldered with undisguised hunger as they stared out of the screen. A booming alien voice emanated from the machinery, speaking in strangely accented but understandable English. "Human, you have bested Klakut, our fiercest champion, in single combat. By the ancient rights of our people, you have won the privilege of mating with our females. You must sire the next generation of Socksgar warriors and strengthen our species with your superior genes. It is a great honor. You have until the next solar alignment to complete this sacred duty. If you do not..." The image changed again to a view of Earth, shimmering blue and green and vulnerable. "Your world will suffer the consequences." The transmission cut off, leaving Zach standing slack-jawed in stunned silence as the implication sank in. Somewhere in the distance, a gong began to sound, low and ominous. The females on the screen started writhing with greater intensity, their eyes boring into Zach. Sarge?" Jenkins said, scratching his head. "Did that thing just say what I think it said? Because it sounded an awful lot like you just got drafted to be the galaxy's busiest sperm donor." "Shut up, Jenkins," Zach and Hernandez said in unison. Zach ran a hand down his face. This was beyond foobar. Somewhere in the universe, the gods of war were laughing their asses off at him. "Congrats on the promotion to Intergalactic Ladies' Man, sir," Kowalski said, slapping him on the shoulder. "Guess we know who's buying the first round of space penicillin back at base." "I hate you all," Zach groaned. "I should have been a fucking accountant." He glanced back at the screen, where the Sockscar females were still undulating provocatively, beckoning to him with come-hither stares and sensual caresses of their own bodies. "I am so fucked," Zach muttered, and not in the fun way. Zach paced back and forth in front of the alien screen, his mind racing. This had to be some kind of sick joke, a hidden camera show. Any moment now, a smarmy host would pop out from behind a boulder and yell, "Surprise!" But as the seconds ticked by and no such revelation came, the sinking feeling in Zach's gut only intensified. This was real. Somehow, through some twisted alien logic, he'd been chosen to... He couldn't even bring himself to think it. "Order, Sarge?" Hernandez asked, her voice cutting through his spiraling thoughts. Zach shook himself, right. He was still in command here. He had to get a grip, think this through logically. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath. "First things first, we need to establish a perimeter, post a watch. If there are more of those Socksgar warriors lurking around, I don't want them catching us with our pants down, literally or figuratively." Jenkins sniggered at that, but quailed under Zach's glare. "Kowalski, Chang, I want you on first watch. Hernandez, see if you can raise the Argon on comms. We need to appraise command of the situation." "What are you going to tell them, Sarge?" Kowalski asked as he checked the charge on his pulse rifle. "Sorry, Admiral. Can't make it back for the scheduled extraction. I've been conscripted to knock up a bunch of alien broads. Be back in time for the baby showers?" "I'll tell them the truth," Zach snapped, "that we've made contact with a potentially hostile alien force and require further instructions." He didn't mention the part about his impending stud duties. One thing at a time. As the squad moved to carry out his orders, Zach turned back to the screen, still showing the writhing Socksgar females. He had to admit, as far as alien species went, they weren't hard on the eyes. Tall and lithe, with smooth, lightly scaled skin in shades of pale blue and green. Their faces were strangely beautiful, with high cheekbones, full lips, and large almond-shaped eyes that seemed to sparkle with intelligence in hidden depths. And their bodies, well, the way they moved, all sinuous grace and coiled power, stirred something primal in Zach. He felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with the arid climate. "Get it together, Thanor," he muttered to himself, tearing his gaze away. This wasn't some cheesy sci-fi porno. He was a Marine, a professional. He had a job to do, even if that job apparently now included interspecies procreation. He was jolted out of his thoughts by a shout from Hernandez. "Sarge, I've got the argon!" Zach hurried over to the corporal, who had her comms unit set up on a flat boulder. The small screen showed the craggy, no-nonsense face of Admiral Holloway, the Argon's commanding officer. "Report, Sergeant," the Admiral barked, his voice crackling with static. "What's your sit rep?" Zach swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. How the hell was he supposed to explain this clusterfuck? "Sir, we've made contact with the Sockscar," he said, deciding to start with the basics. "One of their warriors attacked us inside some kind of ancient temple. I neutralized the threat, but then we received a transmission from what appears to be their leadership." He hesitated, glancing at Hernandez, who gave him an encouraging nod. "And," the Admiral prompted impatiently, "what did this transmission say, Sergeant?" Zach took a deep breath. "Sir, according to the Sockscar, by defeating their champion in single combat, I've apparently won the right to mate with their females." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Zach could practically hear the gears turning in the Admiral's head as he processed this information. "Come again, Sergeant," Holloway said at last, his voice dangerously quiet. "I could have sworn you just said the Sockscar want you to impregnate their women." "That's affirmative, sir," Zach said miserably. "They said it's some kind of sacred right, that I have to father the next generation of their warriors to strengthen their species. Apparently I have until their next solar alignment to complete the, ritual. If I refuse, they've threatened to attack Earth." Another long silence. Then, to Zach's utter disbelief, the Admiral started to laugh. A deep, belly-shaking guffaw that went on until tears streamed down his craggy face. "Oh, Thanor," Holloway gasped, wiping his eyes. "Only you, son. Only you could turn a routine scouting mission into a goddamn intergalactic booty call." Zach felt his face flush with equal parts embarrassment and indignation. This was serious, damn it. The fate of humanity was at stake. The Admiral finally got himself under control, his face settling back into its usual stern lines. "All right, Sergeant, here's what we're going to do. You're going to sit tight and wait for further instructions. I need to kick this up the chain of command, see how the brass wants to play it. In the meantime, do not, I repeat, do not engage in any extracurricular activities with the locals. Understood?" "Understood, sir," Zach said through gritted teeth. "Good. Holloway out." The screen went blank, and Zach slumped against the boulder, suddenly exhausted. "Well," Hernandez said after a moment, "that could have gone worse." Zach shot her a baleful look. "How exactly? The Admiral thinks this is all some big joke. He's probably telling the whole fleet about it as we speak." "Hey, look on the bright side, Sarge," Jenkins piped up, a shit-eating grin on his face. "If this all goes sideways, at least you'll go down in history as the man who boned for peace." Zach threw a rock at him. As the squad settled in to wait for further orders, Zach found his gaze drawn inexorably back to the screen, still showing the alluring Sockscar females. What the hell was he going to do? If he refused the Sockscar's demands, Earth would be put at risk. But if he went through with it, the fate of humanity, resting on his performance in the bedroom. No pressure, right? Zach closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the sun-warmed stone, trying to block out the insistent pulse of desire that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. It was going to be a long solar alignment. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness as Zach and his squad waited for further instructions from the Argon. The binary suns crossed the sky and began to set, painting the alien landscape in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Zach tried to keep himself busy, checking and rechecking their perimeter, monitoring the comms for any sign of activity. But his mind kept wandering back to the Sockscar females and their sinuous, alluring dance. What would it be like, he wondered, to mate with an alien species? Would it even be physically possible? The Sockscar looked humanoid enough, but there could be all kinds of hidden differences in anatomy and biology. And what about the cultural implications? The Sockscar clearly placed a high value on martial prowess and genetic superiority. Would they expect him to fight for his place in their hierarchy? To prove his worth as a mate? The thought sent a thrill of excitement through him, followed immediately by a surge of guilt. He shouldn't be thinking about this, damn it. He was a Marine, not some horny teenager. He had a duty to his squad, to his planet. A duty that apparently now included interspecies hanky-panky. Zach was jolted out of his increasingly lurid thoughts by a shout from Kowalski. "Sarge! Movement on the perimeter!" Zach was on his feet in an instant, pulse rifle at the ready. "Report! Multiple contacts, closing fast from the north," Kowalski said, peering through his rifle's scope. "They're big, Sarge. Really big." Zach's heart sank. More Socksgar warriors come to finish what their champion had started? Or something worse? He keyed his comms. "Hernandez, any word from the Argonne?" "Negative, Sarge," the corporal replied, frustration evident in her voice. "I can't raise them. Something's jamming our signal." Zach swore under his breath. Of course, the Socksgar had them right where they wanted them, isolated and cut off from support. Classic divide and conquer tactics. Well, if the Socksgar wanted a fight, he'd damn well give them one. "All right, listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the rising tension like a knife. "We've got hostiles inbound. I want a firing line established along the ridge. Jenkins, Hernandez, I want you on the flanks. Chang, Kowalski, you're with me in the center. Overlapping fields of fire, just like we drilled. Nobody gets through, understand?" A chorus of "Yes, Sergeant!" rang out as the squad scrambled to take up their positions. Zach took a deep breath, trying to calm the adrenaline surging through his veins. This was it. Time to see what these Socksgar were really made of. The first of the aliens crested the ridge, and Zach's eyes widened in shock. They were Socksgar, all right, but not warriors. They were females, dozens of them, moving with that same sinuous grace he'd seen on the screen. But instead of diaphanous gowns, they wore form-fitting armor that accentuated every curve and plane of their lithe bodies. They carried an assortment of wicked-looking weapons, curved blades, barbed whips, sleek energy rifles, and they were all staring directly at him, their almond eyes glittering with predatory intent. Zach swallowed hard, his finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. "Hold your fire," he ordered, his voice cracking slightly. "Let's see what they want." The Socksgar females flowed down the ridge like a tide of sleek, deadly grace, fanning out to surround the human squad. They moved with the coordination of a pack of wolves, each one perfectly in sync with her sisters. The one in the lead, a statuesque beauty with iridescent blue scales and piercing violet eyes, stepped forward and raised a clawed hand in what Zach hoped was a gesture of peace. "Human," she said, her voice a throaty purr that sent shivers down Zach's spine. "I am Zalara, first consort of the Socksgar. We have come to escort you to the breeding chambers." Zach blinked, his mind reeling. Breeding chambers? First consort? What the hell had he gotten himself into? He licked his suddenly dry lips, trying to find his voice. Look, Zalara, was it? I appreciate the offer, really, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not going anywhere with you." Zalara cocked her head to the side, a predatory smile playing at the corners of her full lips. "It was not an offer, human. It is a sacred duty, decreed by the ancient rights of our people. You have proven your worth in combat. Now you must prove your virility." She took a step closer, her armor creaking with the movement. Zach fought the urge to take a step back, to put some distance between himself and this alien temptress. "And if I refuse?" He managed to get out, his voice sounding strained even to his own ears. Zalara's smile widened, showing a flash of needle-sharp teeth. "Then we will take you by force. One way or another, human, your seed will mingle with ours. It is inevitable." Zach's mind raced, desperately trying to find a way out of this situation. He couldn't fight them, not without risking his squad. And he couldn't give in to their demands, not without betraying everything he stood for as a Marine. But what choice did he have? The fate of Earth hung in the balance. If he refused the Socksgar, they would surely make good on their threat to attack his homeworld. Billions of lives, snuffed out because of his stubborn pride. No, he couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. Slowly, deliberately, Zach lowered his rifle. "All right," he said, his voice hollow with resignation. "I'll go with you, but my squad comes with me. I won't leave them behind." Zalara inclined her head in acquiescence. "As you wish, human. They may bear witness to the rites, but they cannot interfere. This is between you and the consorts." Zach nodded, then turned to his squad, who were watching him with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "We're going with them. Hernandez, you're in charge until I get back." "But Sarge?" Jenkins started to protest, but Zach cut him off with a sharp look. "That's an order, Private. I'll be fine. Just keep trying to raise the argon. Let them know what's happening." With that, he turned back to Zalara and spread his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Lead the way, consort." Zalara's smile turned triumphant as she gestured for her sisters to surround Zach. They fell into formation around him, a living shield of sleek, deadly bodies, and began to march him away from the temple, towards the heart of the Soxgar encampment. As they walked, Zach's mind was a whirl of conflicting emotions. Fear, certainly, at the prospect of what lay ahead. Anger at being forced into this impossible situation. But there was something else too, lurking beneath the surface. A dark, primal thrill at the thought of mating with these exotic, dangerous creatures. He tried to push the feeling down, to focus on his duty, on the fate of his planet. But with every step, every brush of Zalara's armored body against his, it grew stronger, more insistent. By the time they reached the breeding chambers, a vast, cavernous space lit by pulsing, bioluminescent tendrils, Zach was fighting a losing battle against his own treacherous desires. Zalara turned to him, her violet eyes smoldering with barely contained hunger. "Prepare yourself, human," she purred, her claws trailing down the front of his armor in a teasing caress. "The rites are about to begin." Zach took a deep, shuddering breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and on his performance in the breeding chambers. The breeding chambers were unlike anything Zach had ever seen. The vast circular space was dominated by a massive raised dais in the center, its surface covered in plush, exotic furs and shimmering silks. Pulsing tendrils of bioluminescence cast the room in a soft, otherworldly glow, and the air was heavy with a musky, intoxicating scent that made Zach's head swim. Zalara led him towards the dais, her clawed hand resting possessively on the small of his back. The other consorts fanned out around them, their lithe bodies undulating in a hypnotic, sensual dance. "Behold, sisters," Zalara declared, her voice ringing out through the chamber, "the champion who will father the next generation of Soxgar warriors." A chorus of trilling, ululating cries rose from the assembled females, their almond eyes glittering with anticipation. Zach felt a surge of primal male pride at their obvious approval, even as a part of him recoiled at being objectified in such a way. Zalara turned to him, her violet gaze smoldering. "Remove your armor, human," she commanded. "Let us look upon the body that will soon be joined with ours." Zach hesitated, his hands hovering over the clasps of his battle-scarred armor. This was it, the moment of truth. Once he stripped down, there would be no going back. He would be committed to this insane breeding ritual, for better or worse. He thought of his squad, waiting anxiously outside the chambers, of the Argon, still in orbit, unaware of the drama unfolding on the planet's surface, of Earth, his homeworld, blissfully ignorant of the fact that its fate rested on his shoulders, and on his performance in the bedroom. Zach took a deep breath, steeling himself. Then, with a decisive motion, he began to unfasten his armor, letting the heavy plates fall to the floor with a clatter. The consorts watched hungrily as he disrobed, their eyes roaming over his muscular form with undisguised appreciation. Zach felt a flush of heat rising to his face, but he forced himself to meet their gazes steadily, refusing to show any sign of weakness or hesitation. When he was down to his form-fitting undersuit, Zalara stepped forward, her claws trailing teasingly over his chest. "Magnificent," she purred, her voice low and throaty. "You will make a fine mate, human." She began to circle him slowly, her eyes drinking in every detail of his physique. The other consorts followed suit, their hands reaching out to caress his arms, his back, his thighs. Zach shivered at their touch, his skin prickling with a strange electric sensation. "The rites will begin with a test of endurance," Zalara declared, coming to a stop in front of him. "You must prove your stamina, your ability to satisfy the needs of the consorts. Are you ready, human?" Zach swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He had a feeling he knew what kind of endurance she was talking about, but he nodded anyway, his jaw set with determination. "I'm ready," he said, his voice rough with barely contained desire. "Let's do this." Zalara smiled, a predatory flash of teeth. "Excellent." She stepped back, gesturing to the other consorts. "Sisters, prepare him." Before Zack could react, he was swarmed by a tide of sleek, scaly bodies. Clawed hands tore at his undersuit, stripping it away in seconds, leaving him bare and exposed before their hungry gazes. He gasped as he felt their touch on his skin, 1,000 electric pinpricks of sensation that sent jolts of pleasure racing through his nerves. The consorts were everywhere, their sinuous forms pressing against him from all sides, their breath hot and heavy in his ears. And then, to his shock, he felt a hand close around his manhood, already straining with need. He looked down to see Zalara kneeling before him, her violet eyes glittering with mischief as she began to stroke him with slow, deliberate motions. "Let us see how long you can withstand the attentions of the consorts, human," she purred, her tongue darting out to taste him. "Let us test your endurance." Zack's head fell back with a groan as Zalara took him into her mouth, her forked tongue swirling around his length with mind-melting skill. The other consorts joined in, their hands and mouths roaming over his body, teasing and caressing every inch of his skin. It was too much, too fast. Zack's senses were overloaded, his mind reeling with pleasure as the Sockscar females worked him with single-minded determination. He could feel his climax building already, a tidal wave of ecstasy threatening to crash over him at any moment. But he gritted his teeth, fighting it back with every ounce of willpower he possessed. He couldn't give in. Not yet. Not until he'd proven himself worthy of the consorts, of the sacred duty that had been thrust upon him. He lost track of time as the rites continued, his world narrowing to a haze of sensation and need. The consorts were relentless, their skilled ministrations driving him to the brink of madness again and again, only to pull him back at the last moment, leaving him gasping and shuddering with denied release. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zalara pulled away, her violet eyes glittering with satisfaction. "Enough," she declared, her voice ringing out through the chamber. "The human has proven his endurance. He is worthy to mate with the consorts." A cheer went up from the assembled females, their voices blending in a cacophony of primal lust. Zack sagged against the dais, his chest heaving, his body slick with sweat and the consort's musky secretions. Zalara leaned in close, her breath hot against his ear. "You have done well, human," she purred, "but the true test is yet to come. Are you ready to father the next generation of Sockscar warriors?" Zack looked up at her, his eyes blazing with a fierce, primal determination. "I'm ready," he growled, his voice rough with need. "Let's make some babies." And with that, he surrendered himself to the rites, to the ancient, sacred duty of ensuring the survival of the Sockscar species, and by extension, the safety of his own world. As he lost himself in a tangle of sleek, scaly limbs and urgent, gasping cries of pleasure, Zack couldn't help but marvel at the strange twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. Who would have thought that the key to saving humanity would lie not in the heat of battle, but in the heat of passion? But then again, as the old saying went, make love, not war. Or in this case, why not both? Zack lost all sense of time as he surrendered himself to the ancient Sockscar breeding rites. The consorts were insatiable, their sleek, powerful bodies demanding his attentions again and again, driving him to heights of ecstasy he had never known possible. Through it all, Zalara remained at the center of the maelstrom, her violet eyes burning into his as she guided him through the complex rituals of Sockscar mating. She was a force of nature, primal and irresistible, and Zack found himself helpless before her, a willing slave to her every whim and desire. But even as he lost himself in the heat of passion, a part of Zack's mind remained coldly, clinically detached, analyzing the situation with a soldier's practicality. He was doing this for a reason, he reminded himself, for Earth, for humanity. Each mind-shattering climax, each moment of shuddering, gasping release, was another step towards securing his species' survival. At least that's what he told himself. But as the rites went on, as the consorts wrung pleasure after shattering pleasure from his straining body, Zack found it harder and harder to remember his noble purpose. All that seemed to matter was the next peak, the next plunge into ecstasy, the next chance to prove his virility and strength to these magnificent alien females. Finally, after a small eternity of sweat-slicked scales and urgent, ululating cries, Zalara called a halt to the proceedings. Zach collapsed onto the dais, his chest heaving, his mind reeling, every muscle in his body thrumming with exhausted satisfaction. The consorts gathered around him, their almond eyes glittering with approval and something that might have been respect. Zalara stepped forward, her clawed hand tracing the contours of Zach's heaving chest. "You have done well, human," she purred, her voice low and throaty. "The consorts are pleased with your performance. Your seed has been planted in fertile soil." Zach managed a weak grin, struggling to catch his breath. "Glad I could rise to the occasion," he quipped, his voice rough and ragged. Zalara's brow ridge quirked in amusement. "Indeed? You have proven yourself a true champion of your species. The Soxgar will honor the bargain. Earth will be spared." Zach felt a surge of relief wash over him, tempered by a strange, bittersweet pang of regret. It was over then. He had done his duty, fulfilled his end of the bargain. He should be happy, elated even. So why did he feel so empty inside? Zalara must have sensed his inner turmoil, for her expression softened, becoming almost tender. "You have earned a place of honor among the Soxgar, human," she said softly. "You will always be welcome here, in the breeding chambers and beyond. Your children will be raised as warriors, strong and proud." Zach swallowed hard, a lump rising in his throat. His children. The thought sent a strange, fierce thrill through him, mingled with a sense of profound responsibility. He had fathered a new generation of Soxgar, half human, half alien. What would they be like? Would they inherit his strength, his courage, his sense of duty? Or would they be something else entirely? Some strange new hybrid race that would change the galaxy forever? He shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside. That was a question for another time, another place. For now, he had to focus on the present, on getting back to his squad and his ship, on getting back to Earth. With a grunt of effort, Zach levered himself upright, his abused muscles screaming in protest. The consort stepped back respectfully, giving him space as he reached for his discarded undersuit and began to don it with fumbling, clumsy fingers. Zalara watched him dress, her violet eyes unreadable. "You will always have a place here, Zach Thenor," she said formally, using his full name for the first time. "But I sense that your path lies elsewhere, at least for now. Go with the blessings of the Soxgar and know that you will be remembered in our songs and stories for generations to come." Zach paused, looking up at her with a wry, crooked smile. "I appreciate that, Zalara, really. But let's be real here. This was a one-time thing, a crazy, heat-of-the-moment deal. I've got a job to do, a planet to protect. I can't exactly drop everything and play house with a bunch of alien babes, no matter how mind-blowingly hot the sex is." Zalara's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "I understand, Zach Thenor. Duty calls. But know this, you will always have a place here, should you ever tire of the burdens of leadership and long for the comforts of the breeding chambers once more." Zach barked a laugh, shaking his head ruefully. "I'll keep that in mind," he said, fastening the last clasp on his undersuit and reaching for his armor. "But for now, I think it's time I got back to my squad before they start to worry. Or worse, before Jenkins starts getting ideas." He shuddered theatrically, and Zalara trilled a laugh, the sound strangely musical to his ears. "Go then, Zach Thenor. Return to your people. But remember your time among the Soxgar and the bond we now share. May your loins be forever fruitful and your enemies forever crushed beneath your boots." Zach grinned, sketching a jaunty salute. "Back at you, Zalara. Stay sexy." And with that, he strode from the breeding chambers, his head held high, his step sure and proud. He had done the impossible, secured peace for his planet through an act of interspecies diplomacy that would go down in the history books, or at least in the steamy, late-night extranet feeds. But as he emerged into the harsh, unforgiving light of the alien suns, Zach couldn't shake the feeling that his adventure with the Soxgar was far from over. After all, he had a feeling he'd be back in the breeding chambers sooner than he thought, whether he liked it or not. Zach emerged from the Soxgar compound to find his squad waiting for him. their expressions a mix of relief, admiration, and barely suppressed amusement. Jenkins, in particular, looked like he was about to burst with barely contained mirth. "Well, look who's back from his little diplomatic mission," the private quipped, his eyes gleaming with humor. "How'd it go, Sarge? Did you manage to secure a peace treaty? Or just a piece of tail?" Hernandez shot him a withering glare, her voice stern but tinged with respect. "Can it, Jenkins? The Sarge just put everything on the line for Earth. The least you can do is show a little respect." Jenkins held up his hands in mock surrender, his grin never wavering. "Hey, no disrespect intended, Corporal. I'm just saying our fearless leader just spent the last few hours elbow deep in alien strange. You gotta admit, that's pretty damn impressive." Zach felt a mix of pride and embarrassment at their words, but he kept his expression neutral. "All right, that's enough," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "You all know the score. The Soxgar agreed to leave Earth alone in exchange for my participation in their breeding rituals." Kowalski nodded, a hint of awe in his voice. "Damn, Sarge, that's taking one for the team on a whole new level." Zach shrugged, trying to play it off as just another day on the job. "It's what any of us would have done, given the circumstances. The mission comes first, always." Hernandez stepped forward, her expression solemn and respectful. "We're just glad you made it back in one piece, Sarge. What you did in there, that took guts, more than most men have." The others murmured their agreement, a newfound depth of admiration in their eyes. Zach felt a surge of gratitude and affection for his squad, his brothers and sisters in arms. They understood the sacrifices that sometimes had to be made, the lengths to which a soldier had to go to protect their people. "Thanks, guys," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "But let's not dwell on it, all right? We did what we had to do, and now it's time to move on. We head back to the Argonne, file our report, and get ready for the next mission. Business as usual." The squad nodded in agreement, their expressions serious and focused once more. Zach felt a sense of pride and unity, a bond that could never be broken. These were his people, his family, and he would do anything to keep them safe, to ensure their survival, even if it meant sacrificing his own body and desires on the altar of interspecies diplomacy. But as they made their way back to the drop site, Zach couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Soxgar had gotten a taste of what humanity had to offer, and he suspected they would be back for more before long. He just hoped that when that day came, he would be ready to face whatever challenges and temptations the galaxy saw fit to throw his way. Ready to do his duty, no matter how much his body might beg for respite. But for now, all he wanted was a long, hot shower and a chance to rest his aching muscles. The rest could wait until tomorrow. After all, he had a feeling he was going to need all the strength and stamina he could muster, because something told him that his days of playing galactic gigolo were far from over, and that the fate of humanity might just rest on his ability to rise to the occasion time and time again, in every sense of the word.